Good morning, Carl. Uh, Slightly bad weather for this recording, but today I thought I'd go through scrambled egg super for you. That was always one of my favorites with Oma, and I'm glad you like it. So here we go. I don't like to brag and I don't like to boast, said Peter T. Hooper. But speaking of toast, and speaking of kitchens, and ketchup and cake, and kettles and stoves, and the stuff people bake, well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Liz, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is. Why, only last Tuesday, when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about. You see, I was just sitting here resting my legs, and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs, and sort of got thinking it's sort of a shame, and that scrambled eggs always the same, and that's because ever since goodness knows when, they've always been made from the eggs of a hen. Just a plain common hen. What a dumb thing to use, with all of the other fine eggs you could choose. So I decided to change that just for a change. I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fine fancy eggs that no other cook cooks, like the eggs of the ruffle-necked salamagooks. The salamagookses say they should be good, so I went out and found some as quick as I could. I was looking them back to the house. I happened to notice a tizzle-top grouse in a tree down the street, and I knew from her looks that her egg and the eggs of the salamagooks ought to mix mighty well, or to taste simply super when scrambled together by Peter T. Hooper. So I took those eggs home and I frizzled them up. I added some sugar, 2/3 of a cup, and a small pinch of pepper, and also a pound of horseradish sauce that was sitting around, and also some nuts. Then I tasted the stuff, and it tasted quite fine, but not quite fine enough. To make the best eggs a scramble has ever been made, a cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I went out into the country quite rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flitting about. I looked with great care at a mop-noodled finch. I looked at a beagle, a back-beaked, bald-headed grinch, and I also looked at a shade-roosting quail. And I looked at a spritz and a flannel who was roosting right under a lassalak's tail, and looked at a spritz and a flannel-winged jay. But I didn't stop. I kept writing them away because didn't have eggs. They weren't laying that day. Then suddenly, boy, up that hill a short space. Birds! They were laying all over the place. Great happy gay families with uncles and cousins all laying strictly fine eggs, fresh eggs by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble, more super than super. Scrambled eggs super dee dooper dee booper, specialty luxe a la Peter T. Hooper. I picked out the eggs in the most careful way. I only picked the eggs I knew were grade A, so I only took eggs from the very best files. So I didn't take eggs from the twiddler owls, because I knew the eggs of those fellows that twiddled taste sort of like dust from inside a bass fiddle. I went for the kind that were mellow and sweet, and the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet, which is due to the very sweet trouts that they eat. And those trout, well, they're sweet because they only eat blogs, and blogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs. And the reason they're sweet, why, whenever they lunch, it's always the world's sweetest bees that they munch. And the reason no bees can be sweeter than these, they only eat blossoms of beezelnut trees. And these beezelnut blossoms are sweeter than sweet. And that's why I had several eggs from the queet. But I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork but with fur like a poodle. For they say the eggs of this kind of stork are gooey like glue, and they stick to your fork. And yolks like these eggs, I'm told, taste like fleece, and the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. The places I hiked to, Carl, the roads that I rambled, to find the very best eggs that ever been scrambled. 100 new birds on wild tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. I wiggled my way and I crawled at a creek, through a forest of ferns. I was 14 miles deep, Carl, and I mushed through the brush till I found a farm quigger, whose eggs are as big as a pinhead, no bigger. Then I went from the eggs of a long-legged quong. Now this quong, Carl, well, she's built just a little bit wrong. For her eggs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs 20 feet in the air, and they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch them before the eggs crash, you haven't got eggs, Carl. You have long-legged hash. Eggs, Carl. And now I collected 302, but I still needed more, and I suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do. So I telegraphed north to some friends near Fazol, which is 10 miles or so just beyond the North Pole, and they all of them jumped in the Catamasside, which is sort of a boat made from sea leopard's hide, which they sailed out to sea to go looking for grice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice, which they grab with a tool which is known as a squitch, because those eggs are too cold to be touched without which. And while they were sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of. It's hard to believe, but this bird called a pelf lays eggs that are 3 times as big as herself. And now that the Pelf ever learned such a difficult trick, I never found out, but I found that egg quick, and I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen along with the rest. But it didn't stop then, because I knew some ducks by the name of the single-file Zoomian Zucks, who strolled single-file from the mountains of Zums, and quite oddly enough, with the eggs in their thumbs, some fellows in Zums who happened to know just happened to capture 1,000 and so, and they wrapped up their eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handled with care. I needed more helpers, and so for assistance, Carl, I called up a felly named Ali, long distance, and Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone, picked up a small basket and started alone to climb the steep crags and jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the egg of Mount Struku Cuckoo. Now those Mount Struku Cuckoos are rather small gals, but those Mount Struku Cuckoos have lots of big pals, and they died from the skies with great crackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs and they stabbed at his cheeks, with their yammering, clamoring, hammering beaks. But Ali, brave Ali, he fought his way through, and he sent me the egg as he knew he would do, for my scrambled egg soupity doopity booper, specialty Lux, and la pitati hooper. In the meanwhile, I knew I was keeping real busy, collecting the eggs of the three-eyelash tizzy. They're quite hard to reach, so I rode on the top of a hammika shimika shnamika shop. Then I found the great flock of southwest-facing cranes, and I guess they have something wrong with their brains. For this kind of crane, when she's guarding her nest, will always stand facing precisely southwest. So get at those eggs wasn't hard in the least, because I came from behind, Carl, from precisely northeast. And there I captured the egg of a grickly gractus, who lays them up high in a prickly cactus. And then I went for some zips. They're exactly like zoffs, but the zips live on cliffs and the zoffs live on bluffs. And seeing how bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zoffs from the zips. But I know that the egg I got from the bluffs. If it wasn't a zips from the cliffs, it was a zoffs. Now I needed the egg of a mosh-watching sneth, who's a bird so big she scares people to death. And this awful big bird, well, the reason they name her the moth-watching sneth is because that's how they tame her. She likes watching moths, sort of quiets her mind, and while she's watching, you sneak up behind, and then you yank out her egg, so I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. If you want eggs you can't buy in the store, you have to do things never thought of before. Why, to get the eggs of one very small doff, we had to pry one whole mountaintop off. And then I heard of some birds who lay eggs, if you please, that taste like the air in the holes of Swiss cheese, and they live in big Zanzibar trees. And so I ordered a treeful. The job was immense, but I needed those eggs, and said hang the expense. I still needed more and more, and I saved it for last, the egg of the frightful bombastic aghast. And that bird is so mean, and that bird is so fast, that it had to escape on a gillica just. A fleet-footed beast who can run like a deer, but sort of looks different. You steer him by ear. All through with the searching, all through with the looking. I had all I needed, and now for the cooking. I rushed to my kitchen, the place where I stacked them. I rolled up my sleeves, I unpacked them and cracked them and shucked them and chucked them in 99 pans. I mixed in some beans, I used 55 cans. And I mixed in some ginger, 9 prunes and 3 figs, and parsley, quite sparsely, just 22 sprigs. Then I added 6 cinnamon sticks and a clove, and my scramble was ready to go on the stove. And you know how they tasted, Carl? They tasted just like... Well, they tasted exactly just like scrambled eggs, soupity doopity booper, specialty Lux a la pitati hooper.